Alright, so here we are in that little tiny garage that I built years ago on this property. It was the first thing I built. We need to fix this truck. For those of you that are wondering, yes, I have a garage in the works. I would have already started building it, but I've been having a problem finding an engineer. So I finally found one, and we should have some plans in the works for a 40 by 60. But for now, this garage works fine for doing stuff like this on a pickup truck or smaller. I hope to have this garage built before the winter this year, so we'll see how that goes. So on this pickup truck, this is a project that I've been putting off for a while. I've had oil in the coolant. And it is not pleasant, because what happens is it overflows into this container, which is the overflow tank, and then it starts overflowing out of the top of that, and it goes all over the place. So I try not to drive this truck any more than I have to, which is not really much because I'm mostly working on my house, so once in a while I got to get materials with it, but other than that I'm not really doing any jobs right now, so I don't really need to use it that much. And I just sort of keep topping off the oil and deal with it until now when I need to get it fixed. So to give you an update, I was going to do a video on it, but I didn't. I replaced the oil cooler, which is right here. It's behind the oil filter housing. Some of these trucks have a problem where the oil cooler will leak and it will combine the oil and water, and basically the oil wins because it's got more pressure, because I'm seeing up to, I think, 80 pounds of pressure in the oil, whereas you're not near as much with the coolant. It's 16 psi for the coolant, so the oil is going to win, and therefore I never see any coolant in the oil. So long story short, I guess it's good that I didn't video that, because that did not fix the problem, and I'll show you why. So here is the oil cooler that I took out, and really this is the part that would fail on it. Pieces of it could get corroded, and then it'll form a pinhole leak, and then the oil goes through this, and surrounding it would be coolant. This goes into the block of the engine. And so what I did is, there's two ports on here, and I just blocked off both ports with actually a hydraulic plug. These are really nice plugs. They're the Rhino plugs. And over here I bolted on a plate and put a valve stem in, which fits perfectly. So then I can pressurize this with over 100 pounds, which is a lot more than the oil would have. Just put a little bit more in, and drop this in here and wait for it to try to bubble, and it never does. There's no leak in this. This oil cooler is fine, so I kind of replaced it for no reason, but it is what it is. There's really no other way to diagnose it other than just changing it, because by the time you get to it, you just got to take it out and replace it. I suppose you could take it out and then test it, and then if it works you could put it back in, but you still did all the work, so you might as well put a new cooler in with the gaskets and everything anyways, because you got to order it. So unless you want to be down for a while, it's better to just have the part before you even start the project. But you can see over 100 psi, and I tested this a bunch of times just to make sure. I also heard that if you put hot water in here that it's more prone to leak, so I tried that and still no leak. So this oil cooler is fine. So that only leads to one other thing, and it's got to be the head gasket. There have been a few other miscellaneous cases of freeze plugs forming a pinhole in them, probably somewhere on the head, and then the same thing could happen, but most likely that's not a very common thing to happen. And it actually is kind of a common thing for these 24 valve common rail Cummins engines to form a leak in the head gasket. This head goes underneath the firewall by a foot or so, so it's a little bit of a pain, because you got to take the push rods out through the firewall. There's actually plugs underneath there that you take the plugs out, and the push rod pushes up through there, and then you can get everything out. And then taking it out is a whole nother story, but we got one of those little cheap cranes in here, so we'll take that out with that. So I'm going to let that drain the slow way because I don't need necessarily to get into the coolant system right this second. If you open up that plug all the way, it'll get coolant everywhere. In this case, it's mostly just water because I was flushing out the system, but still, I don't want it everywhere in here, so we'll do it the slow way. So I'm going to take the matching rocker arm assemblies out together, and I'm going to set them over here next to the rocker box, and the corresponding hole here will get the corresponding rockers next to them so I don't get them mixed up. So like I said before, there's two plugs back here in the firewall. You got to remove those plugs in order to get the push rods out of the last two holes here. You basically push it up into the hole after you take the plug out, you tip it that way, and you take it out. You know, you would almost think that these Dodge trucks that have this inline 6-cylinder, they should make like a little hump there so that not only do you not have to deal with that push rod, which is not a big deal, but also when you take the head out, you don't have to deal with that, because that's also a pain when you take this head out. You gotta like lift it up, move it over, and lift it up, move it over, just because of that clearance right there not being there. But I'm sure the reason that they don't do that is because this is the same exact truck as the one with the gas motor, with the 5.7 Hemi. So rather than change the production line, they probably just keep the same exact truck, and that's probably why they do it, just to save a little money. So that's the lineup so far, but we got more parts to take out and put over there. This is the grid heater. For those of you that don't know what that is, that's basically like a little coil that heats up the incoming air when it's cold out. This truck doesn't have glow plugs. It has a grid heater. It cycles just like glow plugs, where it turns on when it's cold enough and turns off when it's warm. When I drive this truck in the wintertime, I don't even let this turn on. I just immediately start it and it always starts. I never have to use this grid heater. These Cummins engines are great like that. They always start up when it's cold out, as long as you got good rail pressure. I did have a problem one time where there was a leak in an injector, and because of that the rail couldn't build up pressure, and because of that it actually wouldn't fire, because I think the injection pump won't inject fuel if it doesn't sense enough pressure. And at that point you got to crank it a lot to get enough pressure while it's leaking pressure in order to start it. So then in the wintertime it does start a lot slower because of that. But that's only if you have a leaky injector. Once I got that fixed, this thing turns over in 2 revolutions in the dead of the winter. So to protect these fuel ports from contamination, I'm just going to put the tip of a glove and then a small zip tie. So now the whole common rail is protected. So now I'm going to take the common rail off. There's 3 bolts on it. I'm going to disconnect it here and disconnect it down at the fuel filter housing. And then at the bottom here, I believe that's the return fuel line. Disconnect that. So this return line right here is bolted with a banjo bolt right there, but it also continues on down below that, so you can't just disconnect it there. But I use that little bit of space to my advantage to just shift it over to the right. That way it'll clear everything that we're taking out, so we can just leave it like that for now. So that fuel filter housing is attached to the head right here with these 2 bolts. I believe that's the only 2 bolts. I think I just got to get those off and then I can disconnect it. Just pull it aside. 10mm seems to be a very common bolt in this engine. There's also this bracket for the dipstick too, which is held on by a nut here. So you gotta take that off first. These little wire holders are kind of annoying, but they're bolted to the head, so you gotta take them off. I had enough of unbolting those, so I just unclipped them instead. So we need to take the alternator bracket off, but the bolts are underneath of here, and this bracket kind of folds around, so you really can't get to them. I suppose maybe you can with a wrench, but there's also this wire here that needs to come off, so it's best to just get this alternator out of the way. So I'm gonna loosen up the tensioner, take the belt off, and then I'm going to just loosen up the bottom bolt and take out the top bolt and let it slide that way. If you've ever taken one of these alternators off of this engine, you know that it's really hard to get these two bolt holes lined up, because if it's just shifted like this a little bit, like racked a little bit, it just doesn't want to go in, and you can't see what's going on with the bottom one. So you pretty much got to get the bottom one in first and then the top one. So I'm going to avoid taking the bottom one out at all costs. So I'll just pivot it and let it go that way, and it should leave enough room to clear, and then I can get this bracket off. And I also noticed that this bracket is cracked right here and right there, which I'm sure is not the easiest to get this bracket. I'm sure I could get it, but maybe I can just weld that, because I'm going to have this top bolt off anyways, so maybe I can just take this whole bracket out and just weld it. Alright, so one thing that I can see right now that's going to be super annoying is this tube right here. I believe that goes from your oil cooler to your heater core. This is the hard line. And then I think it connects to, yeah, it connects to a rubber hose over there. That has to come off just for you to get the nut off for this heat shield, and then access the bolt for the exhaust manifold. All that just to get that heat shield off. I am not putting that back on. It's just like a little retainer clip, I guess, to hold the bolts on there so they don't back off, but I'm not worried about it. Okay, so that's really stupid. There's just like no way to get this off of that stud so that you can continue on and get the nut off. As you can see down here, I got this part of this hard pipe here totally disconnected, so I can do whatever I want with it, but it's not enough to pull it off. I could maybe try to bend it, but then I gotta bend it back. See, so there's just not enough room to take this out. I guess they want you to take these nuts and bolts or studs or whatever off and then unbolt it from the turbo, and then you can take it off, but I don't think I really want to do that. I've been going back and forth about this. I think the only thing I can really do is cut this piece of steel right here, and then I'll have to re-weld it, and then to put it back together I'm gonna have to like put a slot on the end of it so that it can slide on, because if it would just slide, then I could just push it that way, and that's good enough to hold it. It's just a bracket for a heater core. It's not anything special. So even if it was slotted, it wouldn't matter if it had a little less strength. of course, I got it out and I didn't even have to fully cut it. I just bent it a little bit. Probably should have just bent it instead of doing that. But whatever, I'm just going to put a slot in the end of here. Make it so much easier for putting back on. Alright, so these gaskets are definitely going to start dropping out now. So I will take them out before they do that. I'm just taking this lifting bracket off because I need to be able to see behind it. Pretty sure there's that one bracket that I gotta take off. I'll have to put this back on once I go to lift it out, which should be right around the corner. And there is a slot that goes around that side of this bracket, so as long as I get this banjo fitting off, then I should be able to loop this up and around and get it off without having to take that bracket off. Wow, that banjo fitting wasn't even tight back there. That's weird. Alright, so I got that banjo bolt out. I just took this line here and just kind of tucked it up out of the way. And now that bracket can stay there. One more thing I guess I got to do before I get this head out is take out the fuel injectors. I thought for some reason I could keep them in there, but I guess from what everybody's saying you should take them out. And so there's these cross tubes right here that go into a little indentation on the bottom of the fuel injectors, and it kind of holds them in place. So you got to take these cross tubes out first, and then you can unbolt these injectors, and then you can pull them out. definitely in there. Alright, now we gotta get the other. Gotta work from outside to inside with that. So.
Well,
Awesome.
getting that corner of
We're in the original spot now. Let's try that.
There goes something.
There's something. There it goes. Alright, let's do this nice and slow and steady. Hold on 1 second.
Okay. Holding.
Okay. A little bit more. Hold on. There it is, okay. Don't really like that, but
I don't like that sound at all.
alright. Go ahead. Alright. Alright, now we need to go back.
Hold on, you caught on a wire here. Hold on. Okay.
Alright, I'm gonna push this way and take this head gasket. Oh, alright, there's the head gasket.
Crank more.
Yep, a little bit more. Alright, now we can start to back up a little bit.
Alright. Reverse gears.
Alright, up a little bit more. Alright, now you can back up.
You got a spot on the bench you want to set that or something?
I do, yeah. Kind of. I don't know. It's so hard to tell. The gaskets look like that one looks like it could be, but that's just a bolt hole there, I believe. So it'd have to leak into over here.
No. Are you gonna have to take this somewhere and get it planed or no?
I'm probably gonna do that tomorrow. Yeah.
It probably wouldn't hurt.
Well, it's not a whole big deal if it's right now to do it.
Yeah.
Alright, so I've been going over this whole head and I don't see any part that stands out as far as something that would leak. I don't see any cracks. It doesn't appear to be warped. I checked out the head gasket. I can't really tell if something's been leaking in it. There's not any like obvious signs. Nothing really stands out, but you can see in some places like right there, you can see how the seal is around 2/3 of it, like the black part you can see is still there, but then this part right here, there's nothing there. I don't know if that might mean something, but that is actually just a bolt hole, so I don't even think that would mean anything anyways. But basically this head gasket just has to be bad. There's really no other thing that it could be. The only other thing could be a freeze plug, but even that, people have said that that could cause it to leak oil in the coolant, but I don't even believe that that's possible, because if you have a freeze plug like that, on the top of the head here, there's no pressure on the oil. That's not part of the pressurized part of the oil. The oil would be pressure fed into the head, but then it would sort of gravity fall down. So even if there was a pinhole in one of those freeze plugs, I do not believe that that would cause that sort of leak. That's not to say that there isn't another freeze plug somewhere else that might be somewhere where it could see pressure, but as far as up here in the top of the head, there's a lot of freeze plugs, but I don't believe that that could cause that. If anything, I think the coolant part of it would be pressurized up to whatever 16 psi, whereas the oil wouldn't, so you'd actually see milk in the oil instead. But that's not the case. There's not a drop of coolant in the oil. Only oil in the coolant. So right now my job is to disassemble as much as I can, and I'm going to bring this to a machine shop. They're going to deck it, which means they're going to resurface this area here, make it flat again. I am pretty sure that it's still flat, but this is cheap insurance. It's not that expensive, and it doesn't take them that long to do this, so it's a good idea to just have it done. A lot of machine shops want you to bring the head super clean, but this place said just bring it the way it is, take as much as you can off of it, and they're gonna send it through the degreaser no matter what, even if I got it super clean. So I'm just gonna let them clean it off. They said that because the valves don't protrude through the head, that they can just leave them on there, so we'll just let them do that, because there's a lot of valves and valve springs and guides and stuff to take off, so we'll just leave all that on there. So I guess at this point what I need to get off is this intake plate here, and I need to get off stuff like this, and he probably wants these bolts that I left on here off, and that sensor. So we'll do that and I'll bring it to him. So that's what it looks like after disassembling those couple little pieces. So now I just need to get this into my car, actually, because I don't really have a truck right now to put it in, unless I want to take my dump truck, but it's too far away to really take my dump truck, so I'm going to put this in the back of my car. Alright, so I just got this back from the machine shop. The guy did a really good job. He said he had to take off 0.6 of an inch to make it straight. So it was definitely warped a little bit. I don't know if that's enough to make it leak. He said it was mostly warped around the fire rings, so probably wasn't enough to make it leak. It was probably the head gasket. But he got this all cleaned up nice. And somehow between cleaning this up and decking the head, it was only $150. I gave the guy $200. I was like, it's worth at least that. But I'm glad I got that done. Like I said, I don't know if that's enough to cause a leak or not, but at least I can sleep easy at night knowing that I did the right thing. So now we just got to get this hoisted up and put back in. Try it now. Just go down just slowly. Hold up. I'm getting caught up on that end. Okay.
Good?
I don't know. How am I looking over here? Is there just nothing else?
I don't think there's anything in the way here.
Alright.
I can't really even see anything.
Alright, that's looking better now. Go ahead and just let it down just a little bit.
More?
Yep. More. Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah, we just need to move it around slightly to get the dowels lined up.
Stuck on the spring, valve springs there. Stream. That sounded like it went thunk right in. That thunked right into where it had to be. I'm like 99% positive it's good.
Good.
Last ones.
So I was reading up online about the torque specs for this head, and I got so many different answers, but basically the consensus was between 66 and 77 pounds for the first run, and then you do 90 degrees from there. So it's about 125 foot-pounds. So what I did before the second stage was mark them out with a white marker. I marked the bolt in reference to the head, and then when I turned it, I know where 90 degrees is. That also tells you if you missed one or not. So that's all torqued down. Now, most people would agree that you should drive this for a little while and then take the valve cover back off and recheck all these bolts and retorque them if needed, because I guess they loosen up as you heat up the engine and then cool it off again. So since I don't want another blown head gasket, I'm definitely going to do that. But I guess we just need to start reassembling things in sort of the order that they came off. So the exhaust manifold and everything over here, and then I'll switch to the right side. The hardest part is going to be getting all of the electrical cables reassembled the right way, because you don't want to put one in and then have it cross something else or something like that. That's going to be the hardest part. And of course there's that banjo bolt fitting in the back, which is really annoying. And then there's that one bolt for the heater core hose that I had to cut off that I need to re-weld and cut a slot in it. So I welded this bracket back together, and then I slotted this so that it can go back in. For the most part, this kind of stuff is pretty obvious, but not everything is obvious. Like when you put something back, you can sort of feel the wires and feel the memory in them. And if it feels right, you'll know it. And if it feels wrong, you can kind of know it. Alright, so I had to backtrack a little bit. For some reason I thought I took that intake horn off later in the disassembly, but apparently I must have done it earlier, because you can't get this cross tube out for the injector without having that horn out. So I had to take that back out. Number one, to put this cross tube back in, but number two, I think it just makes it easier to work in here, because now you can get to the port for injector number one here. And that does take up a lot of space in here. So anyways, moving on. You know what, I just realized that this hanger is backwards. The machinist, when he took it off, he must have put it back on backwards. So that injector line doesn't fit there. But that's no big deal, I'm not really worried about it. So the next thing we need to do on this engine is a valve adjustment. Since I loosened them all up, they need to be tightened down and adjusted. And it's a good idea to adjust them every 100,000 miles anyways. And I got 300,000 miles on this truck, so. Now there is a spot down there, right here. It's like the timing box. And there's this cap that goes on there. And it's got a 3/8 ratchet square head that goes into it. You just spin that off counterclockwise and take that out. And a lot of these trucks will have a mark on that to show you where the timing is. But this one doesn't have that for some reason. So what I did is find top dead center on the damper down at the bottom. And I took a paint marker and marked it on the side so I could see it better. And then I rotated it until that's sticking up. And then I felt, and cylinder number 1 was loose, exhaust and intake. And number 6 is tight. So I know that we're on top dead center for piston number 1. And then I rotated it, just to make sure, I rotated it 360 degrees to where that timing mark is on the top again. And then number 6 was loose. So we know we're at top dead center on number 6. So then I rotated it 360 degrees to bring it back to number 1, because I want to start with that. So we're going to adjust the valves with top dead center on piston number 1 first. We'll get half of them, and then we'll turn it 360 degrees and do the other half. So the measurement for the rockers on the intake is going to be 10 thousandths. And the rockers for the exhaust are going to be 26 thousandths. So I got both of those out. And the intake is the first one. The exhaust is the second one. So now I can adjust the intake valves on cylinders 1, 2, and 4. And the exhaust valves on 1, 3, and 5. So here's a little cheat sheet. Just keep that handy. You just want to tighten it up till you got some resistance. Too much resistance and it'll pull too hard. Too little and it will just kind of not really make contact. Just enough resistance. So I got all those done. I'm going to rotate the engine 360 degrees. And look for the top dead center mark to be right at the 12 o'clock position. Right there. just to check to make sure piston number 1 is totally tight. That's what we want. Number 6 is loose. So then we'll go intake on 3, 5, and 6, exhaust on 2, 4, and 6. And none of this needs to be like crazy precise, because I think there's like a 10 thou tolerance. For the intake, you could be down to 6 thousandths and up to 15 thousandths. And for the exhaust, the minimum is 21 thousandths and the max is 34 thousandths. So there's quite a range. You don't need to get it crazy precise. That's just the 10 thou and the 26 thou is kind of in the middle of everything. So now that we got all the valves adjusted, there's just a few little things that I got to wrap up here. I bought a new thermostat for here because the seal on the old one was bad, and it's just easier just to buy a new thermostat. So we got to put that in, put the thermostat housing back on, put the heat shield on the exhaust, put the rocker box on, hook up the harnesses for the injectors, and then put the valve cover on, hook up the different hoses to it. And then it's really just a matter of making sure wires are out of the way. But basically at that point, all I got to do is hook the intake back up, and that's it. And then I'll put some water in here and flush out all the rest of the oil, drive it around for a while, keep flushing it out, and then put some antifreeze in it. Oh, and I got to put this plug back. And you know what? While I'm thinking about it, I should put these plugs back to take off the push rods. Because once you put the valve cover back on, it's going to be a lot harder. So I might as well do them now. So if I remember correctly, the nuts that hold down these wires on the fuel injector solenoids, they should be 11 inch-pounds and no more, because you can break these off pretty easy or you can spin them out. And either way, that renders the injector totally useless. So 11 inch-pounds is not a lot at all. So I'm going to go ahead and get these all torqued out. Well, with a little bit of luck and cracking an injector, should be able to fire this right up. Alright, try it. Alright, so I've been driving this for a while and there's still some residual oil coming up, but that's to be expected. That oil was absolutely everywhere in that coolant system. Think of all the little nooks and crannies inside of that radiator, as well as inside the motor, as well as the heater core and all the lines that go to it. There's just a lot of places for the oil to be hiding. So I did put some dish detergent in here to help. That's what you can see, the bubbles there. I think that helps get it out faster. That's what everybody says anyways. So I took probably 1/4 quart of oil out so far since I've done this, since I did the head gasket. But I drove this quite a bit today to test it out and to get all this oil out, and it's just less and less each time. So I know the problem is fixed. I'm like 99% sure. Basically, if the problem isn't fixed, I don't even know what it could be. I guess maybe a cracked block or something. But I looked over the block and it didn't seem to have any cracks anywhere. The head wasn't cracked as far as I could see, and the machinist looked at it, so that's another set of eyes on it, and he said it wasn't cracked, so that can't be the case. But like I said, I'm very confident that this fixed the problem. So I guess now all there is to do is keep driving it, keep getting this oil out. And basically the way I'm getting this oil out is I keep pouring a little bit of water in here and it lets the oil rise to the top. And then I just take a paper towel and dip it in there. And when you dip the paper towel in there, it takes the oil out. So I went through a couple rolls of paper towels, but that's the cleanest way to do it. You could just let it overflow and the oil would come out at the top. That's another way to do it, but then you get oil all over the ground. If you keep draining the radiator, it's not really going to be that effective, and it takes forever too, because you're draining the water out of the bottom and the oil always stays at the top. So you have to drain the entire thing out, and then you get a little bit from the top. But on the way down, it like catches inside the radiator and it doesn't really allow the oil to go down. The best way to do it is to let the oil rise to the top. So as far as the amount of time that it took me to do this, I would say with the camera, I probably have 8 hours tear down and 8 hours put back together. If I wasn't filming it, probably 6 hours each way. You could get this done in a weekend pretty easily. But of course you'd want to get the head machine down, so you can't really do it in a weekend, but you could do it in 2 days time. With this, nothing was really affected other than the oil in the radiator. The power is all still there. So to give you a little history on this truck, I've had it for I think 8 years, maybe a little less, 7 or 8 years or something like that. And it's been a really good truck. The fact that it's 5-speed is really why I got it. I had to do a lot of work to it, but I got this truck for $4 grand when I bought it. And it had 200,000 miles on it. Now it has 300,000. And I used to drive it a lot, but now I don't even think I drive it 5,000 miles a year, probably even less than that. But that's when I was working a lot, and depending on where I was working, I'd put a lot of miles on this. But this truck has a lot of power. I turned it up with one of those Bully Dog tuners, and I put a cold air intake on, which doesn't do a whole lot, and I need to change that. I need to get a whole new assembly for that. I want to get one of those ones where it's enclosed in glass, but I also want to keep the throaty sound to it, so I'm not sure. I'm going to figure out something for that. But I also upgraded the exhaust. You need to keep the EGTs down on it, the exhaust gas temperatures. So the one way to do that is to make a bigger exhaust, and also what helps is putting a bigger turbo on it to keep the EGTs down, because this thing has all the power that you need. But the problem is if you're pulling on a hill for a while, the EGTs climb pretty quickly. So putting that bigger exhaust helped, and a bigger turbo would definitely help too. So maybe in the future that could be something that I could do. I'm very happy with the amount of power it has. It's just whether I can maintain that power going up a hill. I do want to build a new flatbed for this. I think this winter I'm going to do that. I have a garage in the works. I told you guys that earlier in the video. I got the plans on board. I should have them any day, so we can start building a slab for this garage real soon, and we can get it built in the middle of the winter, and then I can have a place to work on things. And I can do stuff like fix up that truck, make it look nice, fix up this lowboy, make it look nice. That machine, every machine that I own or truck that I own or trailer needs some work, so it'd be nice to get that garage done. And I've been stalling on a lot of projects because I don't have a garage yet, And I've been working on my house, but that's getting wrapped up, so things are starting to look like they're starting to get organized, so that's good. But I think that's it for this video, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.